Welcome back to the Weekly Docket on Mama Mystery. The Weekly Docket is a Friday segment where I recap the top stories in true crime for the week. Now, I gotta say, I'm really appreciating the feedback that I'm seeing on these episodes. When you comment on Spotify, I see every comment and I appreciate it so much. And I'm also making an effort to post more written content on our Facebook page. So if you're not already, go follow Mama Mystery on Facebook. I try to post multiple stories, true crime stories a day. Just quick recaps to keep you all in the loop of what's going on in the true crime space. So if you're interested in that, you can go follow me on Facebook. And every once in a while, I share a little bit of our personal life as well, so you can see what I'm putting up with at home. Recently, I had a video go like minorly viral when my son, so I just started a garden. This is my first year gardening. And I am so proud of this garden because I have researched and like studied and prepared to have this garden, and it's actually thriving. We've got tomatoes and lavender and sweet potatoes and various peppers and all these things, okay, like garden staples. But one of my absolute favorite things in our garden is our basil plant. And I will literally just go smell my basil plant for like a hit of dopamine. I don't know why. I just love the smell so much. And I love making creamy pesto pasta because my mom used to make that when I was a kid. She's no longer with us, but I still try to keep that recipe alive. So I started making some like homemade pesto with the basil. And my 3-year-old son apparently loved it so much that one day I was sitting in the kitchen and he comes in from outside from the garden with the entire plant, roots and dirt and all, hanging from his little tiny hand with his big brown eyes just looking up at me. And he's like, "Mommy, I found this for you. You can make pesto. You could make it." And I'm like, "Oh God, why did you take it out of the ground?" So, anyway, long story short, I put the basil back in the ground and it is still doing fine. It's a very resilient basil plant. I did make Augie pesto pasta that night and he said he didn't like it. So anyway, all of that is to say that if you follow me on Mama Mister on Instagram or on Facebook, you might catch little glimpses of my personal life, but for the most part, I talk about true crime on there. So, all right, today is Thursday, July 3rd. We have a lot to cover, from Bryan Kohberger's change of plea to a really disturbing story of a vegan naturopathic parents who were convicted of putting their newborn baby in saunas and cold plunges and like starving this child, thinking that they were probably helping their child by doing these extreme things. But oh, it's a lot. So we also have the Diddy trial. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
So you just heard Bryan Kohberger, the former criminology PhD student accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in 2022, plead guilty in a surprise court hearing this week. So Kohberger admitted to the fatal stabbings of Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Gonzalez as part of a plea deal that spares him the death penalty. In exchange, he faces multiple life sentences without parole, one for each of the 4 first-degree murder counts, plus up to 10 years for an associated burglary charge, which he got from entering the home. So formal sentencing is scheduled for July 23rd in Boise. The proceeding is expected to last a day, during which victim impact statements from the families will be heard. So I understand that some people are probably over this by now and really don't have any interest in seeing him anymore. I'm sure he won't say anything during this hearing, but at least the families get to be heard. So if you do get a chance to watch it, I implore you to do so, just so at least the victims can have the last say instead of him. But he will automatically waive any right to appeal under this plea deal, ensuring that he spends the rest of his life behind bars. He will die behind bars. And the plea deal averts a lengthy capital trial that had been set for August. So literally next month, this trial was finally supposed to start. And so I guess it spares us that trial. It was supposed to be live streamed. I know a lot of people were interested in this trial and learning more about exactly what happened that night, because everything has been so under wraps under this gag order. Nobody has been allowed to talk about it. And so, of course, that will be released or relieved, I guess. And maybe we'll find out more information in the coming months. But I think I can kind of speak for all of us when I say that this came so out of left field, and it was such a hasty, quick, shocker out of left field that it took a minute to kind of process it. And at first I thought, well, at least the families get spared this gruesome trial, having to see pictures probably of their loved ones. And, God forbid those pictures get leaked, and then everyone else sees them as well. And then also, God forbid, there's one juror that is hung because the evidence wasn't strong enough or whatever. Just God forbid all these other circumstances now we don't even have to worry about. So at first I was kind of thinking, well, this is good for the families, right? But then the Gonzalez came out with a statement. The Gonzalez family came out with a statement. And I'm going to read it for you because it added some perspective that I certainly didn't know, and maybe some others didn't either. But they said, quote, "The death penalty is merely an illusion in the criminal justice system. When available, it serves as a bargaining tool for the state, and when rarely applied, it's never enforced due to a highly inefficient appellate process. The notion that someone can plead guilty to a crime and still face years of appellate delays reveals a systemic failure. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office's treatment of our family during this process is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. We questioned decisions early in the investigation, like why was the mayor commenting on the case? Why was the coroner speaking to the families? Why was an officer with less than 2 years of experience leading the investigation? Why was the University of Idaho involved when they declared it an isolated off-campus incident? Why was the university permitted to write a book about the incident while others were silenced under an overly broad gag order? As a result, we were branded adversaries. So it was no shock how the Latah County Prosecutor's Office mishandled the plea deal. They vaguely mentioned a possible plea on Friday without seeking our input and presented the plea on Sunday. Latah County should be ashamed of its prosecutor's office. 4 wonderful people lost their lives, yet the victims' families were treated as opponents from the outset. We weren't even called about the plea. We received an email with a letter attached. That's how the Latah County Prosecutor's Office treats murder victims' families. Adding insult to injury, they're rushing the plea, giving families just 1 day to coordinate and appear at the courthouse for a plea on July 2nd. Who do they think they are? After more than 2 years, this is how it concludes, with a secretive deal and a hurried effort to close the case without any input from the victims' families on the plea's details. Our family is frustrated right now, and that will subside, and we will come together as always and deal with the reality that we face moving forward. Once again, we thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers. So yeah, when you learn that all of this was kind of done behind the scenes within a matter of 3 days, I can absolutely understand the heartbreak and frustration and the feeling of betrayal from these families. And I'm sure it's hard to see it now, because what you were hoping for was to have this trial, see him convicted, and then be sentenced the death penalty. But, they also point out that even the death penalty, might sound great in theory, but look at Scott Peterson. He got the death penalty, and then that conviction was overturned later on, ripping open this old wound, right? So at least now we know he's going to just rot in prison. He'll probably have a miserable life behind bars. That's all we can hope for anyway. And we know that he has absolutely no chance of anything ever changing. There's going to be no appeals. There's no chance. It's done. Like, signed, sealed, delivered, it is done. So at least there's, hopefully some solace in that. But Madison Mogen's family also released a statement, so I'll go ahead and read that one for you now, too. This statement was written by Maddie's father, Ben Mogen, and family. It says, quote, "Our family continues to ache for Maddie, and we have spent well over 2 years grieving and focusing on healing from the trauma of losing her. The plea deal the prosecution has proposed is one that punishes the perpetrator of this horrendous crime, protects the public from further harm, and allows us all who knew and loved those 4 young people the time to grieve without the anxiety of the long and gruesome trial, years of appeals, and potential for mistrials along the way. We thank Bill Thompson and his team for their dedication and painstaking work that forced the perpetrator to admit his guilt. May we all protect our peace in whatever way possible, unite in community, and focus on joy. Please do an act of kindness in Maddie's honor this week so a glimmer of Maddie's light may live on." End quote. Xana's mom also spoke out. Her name is Kara Northington. She's 43 years old, and she's currently in jail being held on drug charges since February of last year. She said that this is the worst place to be when you're going through something like this. And before you judge her mom for being in jail on drug charges, I understand what that comes with. I had a mom that suffered from addiction as well. I cannot imagine losing my child in such a horrific way when I've already been dealing with addiction issues. Addiction is, partly a mental disease. I do believe that there's some choice and, will that comes along with it, but to lose your child in such a horrific way, of course, I would expect someone to relapse. I would not find that to be surprising whatsoever. So the fact that she did relapse after her daughter's murder, I don't know all of the circumstances. None of us do. But I think about the wake that this leaves, right? Like the reverberation through not only the families, but the communities as well. Like the consequences that we don't even think about beyond the trauma of losing a child, how it affects how it ripples through everything else in your life. I truly cannot imagine it. So I actually do want to just extend prayers to Kara and Xana's family. I hope that they're able to eventually come out of this in a positive way, but I can't even imagine how hard that would be. As for Ethan Chapin's family, Ethan was one of 3 triplets, and they haven't released a statement regarding the plea deal, but they are coming out with a documentary called One Night in Idaho, The College Murders, which is premiering on Amazon Prime on July 11th. And so I think they will share their entire experience there. I think they really wanted to do just once. From what I understand, Ethan's mom, who has kind of been the mouthpiece for the family, she's usually the one that's doing the interviews or the talking. I think she mentioned something about wanting Ethan's story to be told, and that's what they're trying to do through this documentary. So I think this documentary will focus a lot on their lives and not just the horrific ending to those lives. So if you do get a chance to watch it, I implore you to do so. I will be watching it. This whole thing is just, I'm still trying to process the fact that he just pleaded guilty out of nowhere, and then that's it. Case closed, no trial. It's just done, and the world just keeps turning. But it's just not setting well with me, as I'm sure it's not setting well with a lot of people, because it was just such a shock. Just as the crime itself was such a shock, everything else that followed has been such a shock. And the way that he just so coolly and robotically said yes, yes, yes to each of those questions, it was like he was answering an interview or something, or taking a test. I cannot remember a better display of sociopathy in my lifetime. And I don't understand what the point of all of this was. What was the point of it? To try to commit the perfect crime because you were a PhD criminology student? What a failure you are. Not only did you not obtain your doctorate, but you proved that you would make a shitty criminal too. So you are just a fucking loser and you can't do anything right. And these poor families and what they've been through, all of this for what? The tortuous 2 years of delay after delay, motion after motion, just to finally give up because you realize you're probably going to get exactly what you deserve, which is the death penalty. And I know a lot of us were hoping for death by firing squad. And so he just bows out like a fucking coward because he can't stand the thought of possibly losing his life. And yet he had the balls to end 4 innocent people's lives, 4 people that would have absolutely done way more in their lifetimes than Bryan ever could have. And that's how he'll be remembered. A coward, a loser, and a creepy looking failure. I think it's interesting how he showed up in court with like no eyebrows and no eyelashes. It looks like he's been sitting in his jail cell pulling out his eyelashes and his eyebrows, probably because of that one witness who said that she remembered seeing a bushy eyebrowed individual in the house that night. I think it was either Dylan or Bethany, but I find it interesting that when we knew that was going to come out, he shows up to plea with no eyebrows because he's clearly been plucking them out behind bars. Like, you're just such a creepy looking failure. You're probably going to die a virgin, and not because you chose to, but because no one would ever touch you because you're so gross. And I hope that the rest of his life is as miserable as possible. The only solace here is that he will likely get his ass rocked in prison, and only then will he finally get a taste of what he really deserves, but it will never be enough. And honestly, I think that that's the only silver lining here, is that he will probably get his ass beat behind prison more than once. And that will be more pain and suffering than he would have had he been given the death penalty. So at least we know he's going to be like abused behind prison, and that will be something that I think we can all cheer for. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say about Bryan Kohberger, the wannabe Ted Bundy who couldn't even get away with one crime. And thank God, because at least he doesn't get to go hurt anybody else, and he can just sit behind bars and rot just like he deserves. On to the next crummy criminal, Sean Diddy Combs. So the music mogul Sean Diddy Combs received a mixed verdict in his federal trial on sex crimes charges. A New York jury acquitted him of the most serious charges, including sex trafficking by force and racketeering conspiracy, but they did find him guilty on 2 lesser counts. Specifically, jurors convicted the 53-year-old rapper on 2 counts of transportation for prostitution, charges related to shuttling women across state lines for illicit sexual purposes. Now, each of those counts carries up to 10 years in prison, meaning that he could face as much as 20 years behind bars at his sentencing. Now, by contrast, the dropped sex trafficking and RICO counts could have meant a life sentence if he had been convicted on them. So the split verdict came after a lengthy trial that included explosive allegations from his former partner, Cassie Ventura, and other women as well. Prosecutors accused him of using his fame and wealth to coerce women into drug-fueled freak-offs with male sex workers, allegedly enforced by violence, blackmail, and even arson. And Sean Combs, his defense team, argued that the encounters were consensual and claimed that the accusers were just motivated by money. The jury's decision, delivered on July 2nd, means that he does avoid a life term, but still faces a significant prison sentence. And if he's 53 years old and gets sentenced to 20 years, then he could potentially get out by 73. I mean, that's essentially like the rest of your life. But I honestly didn't follow this trial as much as many people did. I wasn't really that interested in it because I think Hollywood is just so gross. And the older I get, the more I realize just how gross people can be, especially in Hollywood, and the things that they will do for money and fame and fortune. So yeah, I just didn't really follow this case as in-depth as some others did. But his sentencing date is set for October 3rd. He, in the meantime, was denied bail, so he will stay incarcerated at MDC Brooklyn. He faces up to 10 years, possibly 20, if the judge decides to make those consecutive sentences. But I guess I'll let you know if you're interested in a weekly docket when that time comes in October. I can let you know what he ultimately ends up being sentenced to. But prosecutors are aiming for around 4 to 6 years. So it sounds like he's probably not going to face a lot of time. But anyway, with that said, we'll move on to the next story, which is an update in the Noah Presgrove case. So you might remember we covered this case in episode 197, so fairly recently, but nearly 2 years after 19-year-old Noah Presgrove was found dead under mysterious circumstances in rural Oklahoma, his family has filed a new wrongful death lawsuit naming 7 people that they believe were involved in Noah's death. So if you'll remember, Noah's body was found, it was discovered on September 4th of 2023, lying near a highway in Terrell, Oklahoma. He was naked except for mismatched shoes with his teeth scattered around him. The state's medical examiner determined that Noah died from multiple blunt force injuries to the head, torso, and limbs. However, authorities never treated it as a homicide, and for a time the case was not officially investigated as murder. So frustrated by the lack of criminal charges, Noah's family is now pursuing civil action. Their lawsuit, filed this week, alleges that Noah was beat to death by one or more of the defendants during or after the Labor Day weekend house party. The 7 defendants include some of Noah's closest friends and the adults who hosted that party. Among those named are Noah's best friend, Jack Newton, and his girlfriend, Carter Combs, who were with him that weekend. Also listed are Avery Combs and Logan Jernigan, friends accused of hosting the party. Now, Caleb Newton, Jack's father, who allegedly let Noah ride an ATV that flipped earlier that day, was also named, and Johnny Wilcoxon and Stevie Howard, who were the owners of the property and a neighboring trailer where the party took place. So all of these people are named in this lawsuit, and the suit seeks at least $75,000 in damages and claims the defendants conspired to provide alcohol to underage guests and then failed to protect Noah. Notably, the complaint stops short of pinpointing exactly who delivered the fatal blows, acknowledging it's unclear which individual's actions caused Noah's death. The family's bold legal move is shining a new light on a case that did go cold and aims to hold those present at the party accountable for the tragic end to Noah's life. We talked about this in depth in episode 197, like I said. I believe Austin was even on that episode. But yeah, there were a lot of things that really just made you wonder what really happened at that party, because similar to John O'Keefe's death, everyone was trying to pinpoint John O'Keefe's death as being hit by a car, but the injuries just didn't really line up. The same thing is kind of true for this case. With Noah, they were trying to insinuate that he was hit by a car on the highway while he was walking along the side of the road, but his injuries just didn't really match up. And the fact that he was found completely naked but had his shoes on, it didn't make any sense. So if you want to hear more about that story, go to episode 197. But man, I hope that more comes from this. Somebody's got to be held accountable for Noah's death. He was an all-star athlete. He was salt of the earth. His life mattered. Everybody's life matters, except for Bryan Kohberger's, but everybody's life matters. And so to see this essentially just kind of get tossed to the side like it doesn't matter is very unsettling. So I hope that for the family, they get some kind of closure out of this, if anything. Now, this next story is kind of crazy. It's out of Australia, but it's a gruesome homicide that has taken another turn, apparently. So police have announced that they paused the search for the missing remains of 39-year-old Julian Story, who was allegedly murdered and dismembered last month in Port Lincoln, which is in South Australia. So Julian's partner, Tamika Chesser, was a former Beauty and the Geek reality TV contestant, and she has been charged with his murder after officers responding to a fire at the couple's home on June 19th discovered Julian's headless body in the yard. Now, Tamika, who is 34 years old, remains under psychiatric evaluation at a secure mental health facility and has not yet been formally interviewed by investigators. There is a picture that appears to be leaked of Tamika just facing the camera, and it looks like she completely shaved her head, which is really quite a stark contrast from how she appeared on Beauty and the Geek. Now, Beauty and the Geek, if you don't know what this show is, it's essentially these beautiful contestants dating geeks, I guess. So you can just imagine what the beautiful contestants look like. And back then it was she had the big blonde hair and the big boobs and the makeup, and she was all very well put together. So when you see this picture of her in what appears to be the mental facility or the psychiatric facility, and she's got her head shaved and she's being accused of essentially decapitating her boyfriend, it's just such a stark contrast. Now, in the days immediately following the killing, police and SES crews combed land and sea in an urgent effort to locate Julian's severed head. But despite recovering other body parts, they have so far not found his head. So now authorities say that they are temporarily suspending the ground search while they refocus on scouring CCTV footage from around Port Lincoln in hopes of retracing Tamika's movements. So investigators revealed that Tamika did not drive and often traveled on foot, raising the possibility that security cameras or dash cams may have captured her carrying or disposing of something on the day of the crime. Police have even released photos of the exact clothing that Tamika wore on June 19th, including a distinctive pink top and dark shorts, to jog the public's memory to see if maybe somebody remembers seeing her, or somebody could maybe look at their dash cam footage or their Ring camera footage to see her possibly walking by. So they urge anyone with home or business camera footage from that period or any other information, no matter how inconsequential it may seem, to come forward. For Julian's grieving family, finding all of his remains is really critical for their closure. And they said that, it's crucial that we locate Julian's head. Man, I cannot even imagine that you're searching for his head and you know that it's not connected to the rest of his body. Like, that is just so horrific. The investigation continues, with prosecutors expected to proceed once Tamika's psychiatric assessment is complete. So if you'd like updates on this story, let me know, and I will keep you up to date here on the Weekly Docket. Now, this last story really pisses me off. All of these stories piss me off, but this one really pisses me off. A California jury has convicted a couple whose extreme naturopathic beliefs inflicted permanent brain damage on their infant son. John Gonzalez, who's 38 years old, and Jacqueline Navarro, who's 45, were self-described vegan, mucus-free fruitarians from Tulare County, and they were found guilty of felony child abuse and child endangerment this week. Prosecutors said the pair followed a bizarre health ideology that viewed breast milk as toxic, so they refused to breastfeed or use standard formula, instead feeding their newborn baby a mash of fruits, dates, and honey, which honey you're not even supposed to give infants, and then soy-based formula. They also subjected the baby to extreme therapies, including plunging him into scalding saunas and ice baths within weeks of birth. So this is kind of like a fad right now within the fitness community, and I've seen it myself. We actually have a sauna and an ice bath because it does have benefits like to adults, but to think of putting my baby daughter in this ice bath and then making her sit in a sauna, like, what the actual fuck is wrong with people? But the result was obviously a horrifying decline in this poor child. In August of 2020, during a trip to Orange County, this couple rushed their 10-month-old son to an ER in Newport Beach when he finally became unresponsive. Doctors found the infant gray, emaciated, catatonic, with critically low blood sugar and constant seizures. He had been starved to the point of hypoxia, which caused irreversible brain damage. Though emergency treatment did save his life, the boy, who is now 5 years old, is permanently blind, cannot walk or talk, and is quadriplegic, requiring lifetime care. During the hospitalization, Gonzalez even tried to reject medical interventions, insisting that starvation would lead to healing, according to officials. This week, an Orange County judge accepted the jury's verdict, convicting both parents on all counts, with a special enhancement for causing great bodily injury to a child under 5. They each face up to 12 years in state prison when they are sentenced on July 25th of this year. And the case has also prompted scrutiny of CPS because the baby's grandmother had reportedly made 15 separate complaints to authorities about the parents' neglect before this tragedy. And the local child welfare agency later settled a lawsuit for $32 million over its failure to intervene. Now, this might seem like an extreme take, okay, but I'm just going to give you my personal opinion for what it's worth. I feel like parents are allowed way too much leeway when it comes to their children. And I know that that sounds crazy because parents should be allowed to care for their children in the best way that they see fit. But there are lines. We have to draw some lines here as to how involved a parent can be in the treatment of their child after they inflicted the abuse. Like, why was the dad even allowed in the hospital and even allowed to tell a doctor that he would reject any kind of medical intervention because he believed he knew better? At some point, because people are allowed to reproduce at will and there's no real like pre-requirements or prerequisites for getting pregnant, at some point we have to enforce some laws here because not everybody deserves to be a parent. And no child should be forced to endure treatment solely because they are biologically related to this person. At some point, there has to be better intervention, and that is what these programs and divisions are meant to do, right? They're meant to protect children, but at what point? Because like it seems like they're hardly ever doing their job. It seems like every time I get on here and talk about a case of child abuse, there were so many reports, there were so many red flags, everybody knew something was wrong, but because of so much red tape and so much bullshit that's in place that parents are allowed to get away with, it's almost always too late before the law steps in and protects these children. I don't know what it means going forward. it gets so frustrated. Maybe I've just been doing this too long. But anyway, that is all for today's weekly docket. Sorry I was a little bit heated. I don't know if I'm just like, maybe ready to break soon. I don't think so. I don't think it's that time of the month for me. But man, this week just has me all fired up. Bryan Kohberger really fucked my whole week up. Anyway, I hope you all have a great 4th of July weekend. Please be careful. I know 4th of July weekend is a huge weekend and everyone's, having fun and drinking and maybe not paying attention and they're holding, these, I almost said detonators. It's not detonators, but like, those bombs, like, fireworks in their hands and people are getting their hands blown off. You guys, I need to just go. Just be careful. Stay vigilant. Stay curious. Mama Mystery out. Bye.